Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this very exciting panel. We are going to meet the family, and we are going basically to discuss how family offices are shaping the investment landscape in the region, and whether and when you should engage with them. My name is Pilar Fernandez Hermida, and I'll be moderating this exciting lineup. We have heard this morning about money allocation, and whereas VCs and sovereigns normally take the spotlight, there is a strong current going underneath with family offices. Slowly, family offices are shaping money allocation landscape, including technology startups. Just some numbers. Globally, there are about 10,000 family offices that combined have more capital than VC, hedge funds, and private equity together. Here we're talking trillions of dollars. So the 1 million question, or 1 trillion question is, what are family offices and why do they matter? How they are impacting the health tech investment scene? And when and how you should liaise with family offices. So before we kick off this exciting panel, I would like to ask you, the audience, a couple of questions. How many of you are familiar with the concept of family office? Thank you. How many of you have worked or liaised or collaborated with family offices? Okay. So with that in mind, I think it would make a lot of sense to start off by setting the scene and defining what a family office is and is not. So I will start with Steven. Steven, welcome. You have more than 3 decades of experience working with family offices in US, but also in this region. So could you please do us a taxonomy of what family offices are and are not?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you, Pilar, for moderating this. My fellow panelists, Sally, Frank, Dr. Rue, and all the people that got me to participate this. I especially want to thank my mother. Mom, thank you for having me come. I hope you guys are recording this. Love you, Mom. So just by way of background, I'm a family practice physician. I've done 100 deliveries of babies in my career, albeit I had the wisdom not to deliver my 3 children. My family owns a company called J&B Medical, started in 1996. My mother owns 100% of J&B, so we say she's boss at home and at work. I'm sure you can relate. But we have 18 different business enterprises running the gamut from medical distribution, where we sell everything that goes in a hospital, pharmacy, physician's office, supply equipment, pharmaceuticals, to specialty businesses like animal health. Our claim to fame is we're one of the largest third-party billers of consumable medical products to the homes in the United States. We reach over 260 million people today. We have a telemedicine, telehealth company. We do virtual visits around the world. We're in 49 states. We're in 28 countries. In 2017, I set up my own family office called Akkad Holdings. We're Iraqi Christians. The Akkadian Empire was the first empire in Mesopotamia, and they were the great connectors of the time. So the mantra of the family office is very mission-driven. People, purpose, pay it forward. But the thesis is to invest in opportunities that leverage our global distribution channels. And we have a $5.8 billion biotech life sciences vertical, and a very large health, sports, and media vertical. So to answer your question, family office is a very loosely used term. It could mean many, many different things to many, many different people. My intent when I set up my family office was to have a vehicle that could, number one, invest in opportunities outside of our company, but still had synergies with our company. And number two, I thought it was a manifestation of our values and vision. It was a way for us to make catalytic investments in things that can make a difference in the world. So it was also a manifestation of who we are. I think as far as family offices, one of the tips in dealing with family offices is understanding their goals and objectives. I think a lot of people are so, they think of things in terms of transactions. I've got a deal, I've got an opportunity, I've got a startup. And I think really there needs to be more time in understanding the family office's goals and objectives and themes. And I think if people spent more time doing that, there would be a higher level of success and engagement with family offices.
Thanks for setting the scene. There is a saying that Chris reminded us of, that once you meet a family office, you meet one family office. They're all very different. Of course, they all have money, potentially to invest in you, but that's it. However, they all share a common problem, whether you are a legacy or not. I mean, and the common problem normally is going to be succession planning and wealth preservation. So wealth preservation itself implies that it's going to be a bit traditional, not doing too crazy, because you want to preserve the legacy for the future. And I would really like to ask this question to Chris, because you are fourth generation family office, but you are also very much in the front run of the tech, you know? How can family offices balance wealth preservation and ensure exposure to next generation assets, which is critical in regions like GCC?
Well, I think hello. So I think, thanks for having me, by the way. I think one of the concepts with family offices in general, right, when you talk about the overall capital of family offices, how much you put into an emerging technology might still be a very small fraction of the overall capital of that family office.
Yeah.
So the overall family office still might be in, for lack of better words, more traditional assets, a lower risk base, right, because you're looking for that type of growth. But there's many reasons why you might go into emerging technologies. One, like Stephen mentioned, is the concept of being aligned values, right? We're at a health tech conference. It might be meaningful to the family. There might be other reasons from that perspective. There's also might be reasons because certain next gens get into technology, for lack of better words. I used to do research and development for the US government. I used to invest for the US government. That's my background. So the concept of being able to diligence assets and being able to look at investments for my family is kind of straightforward, right? So I think there's lots of different reasons why you look at it. But I think the other reason why families do it is because you always want to look at what's just replacing your own industries, right? If I have a very traditional family operating business, I want to know what are the technologies that might be disrupting my businesses before I get disrupted. So I think that's one of the other reasons why families look at it.
So you say the play is more for internal added value?
Added value, and bluntly, if you do it smartly, right, you can get a lot higher returns, right? So I mean, I think everybody in this conference probably understands in the private markets, you know, you can potentially get higher returns, but there's, you know, different risks assets. So depending on how you want to build your portfolio.
Out of the 10,000, depends who's counting, family offices out there, most of them have been created in the last 15 years. So going back from legacy, a lot of new family offices are tech-oriented or tech-driven. They come from very fast, high-growth sectors. And my question is for Ida, because you do come from technology, you have a med tech background, and now you are working with IOME, which is very impact-driven, you know, fund, you know, for and also for profits and not profits. And my question is, how do you balance the hype of this tech sector for a quick buck return tomorrow with the impact that we all need, because we need impactful solutions that are much necessary in the sector, and how family offices are playing that?
So for our family office, we try to stay away from the hype. So the second it has a headline, we are not interested. But we always say, if it's a gold rush, we bring the shovels and the buckets, and then we take our shovel and buckets to the next gold rush. And so it's the impact is something. It's passion based. It's kind of so if you have a certain amount of capital, you can afford to look at more than financial return. You look also on social return, you look on kind of economic return. So you can afford to have an impact in your investments. And that is actually what we do in the family office, that we start looking as a legacy, what are you leaving behind, except a ton of money. It's so, and that's also the question. You know, we actually have this philosophical conversation in the office. So, with my principals, so how much time, their lifetime, they want to spend to make more money they can't spend. So it's kind of that is actually really kind of an philosophical question where one of my principals actually said, I don't want to spend any day with my money because I have enough. This headache goes to somewhere else. I want to do something which gives me more, which gives more back to me and gives more back to society. And it's not a philanthropic approach. It's actually, we have philanthropic investments, but sometimes we can be able to take a riskier investment. Because, for example, what you often have with families, and you see this in a lot of the money which is, for example, given for cancer research. For example, if you have a lot of wealth and suddenly, health goes. You always say that somebody who's healthy has 1,000 problems, somebody who is sick has one problem. So suddenly you have this one problem, it's your health. And then, especially if somebody kind of passes on with this disease, a lot of families put then a lot of money to research to make it better for somebody else. So I see a lot of impact, desire. I don't see it so much in the young money. So the new money or the new family offers is kind of, it's a little bit for me fast and furious at the moment. And they need somebody to be more with other people to calm down and see what is this about actually, to be wealthy.
And thanks, Ida, because to me that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the family office space is that maybe you will help improve the narrative about ROI to more return on impact because of that legacy thing, which we very much need because let's face it, in healthcare, not everything is going to be a 100-bagger, it's going to be, but we need to bring things that are necessary. But anyway, we are now in beautiful Dubai, UAE, and we have set the scene about what's happening overall, inbound, and basically in the GCC 2025 has started with a bang, with a lot of handshakes, a lot of visits, from dignitaries. And normally what happens, the sheikhs sign deals and family offices follow, And at the moment the GCC is basically moving towards a new economy, so to speak, from legacy. So the question is for Isha, it's like, because you basically structure technology deals, but your firm, your family office AKJ comes from more traditional assets. So the question is, how can non-specialized family offices in this new tech economy, including health tech, get exposure to these sectors? How do you do it? Or how should you do it, yes? And why is this important for you? Why specifically AKG is having exposure into healthcare?
I'll start with the why, right? Why is it important? And then I'll come down to how we do it. If we were to look at family offices as a whole, we're really looking at future-proofing our portfolio. And the way that we see healthcare, it's really the way that I see it, is at the core of humanity. So it's not really an optionality when we're building our portfolios. It's almost inescapable, right? So when we're looking at it from a financial standpoint or just the statistics of where the sector is going, we're moving from services to infrastructure. That means 10 to 15% of healthcare is currently digitized. That leaves a massive white space for families to come in and tap into. And if we do it right, then I was talking about this yesterday as well, we get to build recession-resilient positions and stable cash flows. This is a very sweet spot for families because we get defensive growth, but we also get the long-term upside, right? Now, our background is in deep tech, and I always get asked, okay, but what actually do you do in deep tech? Historically, we've built software products, services, and solutions, and the applications for that have been wide-ranging, right? From aerospace to big pharma, healthcare, right? So we've served the STEM community, but we haven't really operated healthcare institutions as such. So when we were crafting our strategy, it was a very deliberate choice that stemmed from a personal mission. Our why really went down to our family and the members. We've all faced health crisis. I mean, I guess every single one of us in the audience in some way, we've been customers first, right? And for us, we were customers before we were investors. And my family really wanted to be at the forefront of being a part of building systems because we also witnessed the discrepancies in it. Now, I wanted to lean into what I intuitively understood as a user, which is femtech, diagnostics, therapeutics when it comes to direct investments. But having said that, majority of our exposure to healthcare today is in funds. I think it's the best way to really go about the landscape in a structured way. You want to cultivate, relationships first. So in short, the best way to really do it, to avoid feeling like your investments are a bet and start building bridges towards the knowledge that you don't have, is find strategic partners with operational depth, find funds who understand the regulatory and compliance nuances that you don't currently have, and build from there.
That's a very good point because it's a nice segue to the next section, which is the how you engage and how you guys fund. And I will, for all disclosure with the public, I just said it before, every family office is different. So for every statement we'll make here, there will be an exception. So we'll try to find, some middle ground. But staying on the topic on healthcare, I mean, there are family offices already exposed to healthcare. Dr. Samir, you represent a family office that has a hospital chain, one of the oldest in India. So, but you are a very avis rari, as we say, because you are very much on the forefront of tech adoption, etc. So, how do we get more family offices who are already invested in healthcare, but more traditional assets like hospitals? How do we get them more involved in tech bio and health tech? What do you see is happening in your part of the world?
Yeah, so for us, how we ended up in this, so I represent 5 families, of which 2 of them were exposed to health. One in pharma and one in distribution of pharma, and the other one hospitals as well. The other 2 have exited their core businesses, so that's the pot of gold, right, that we invest with to a large extent. I think all families, when they first start investing, family office diversify. So you'll typically go to a new geography, you'll typically go outside your home core business. But over time, you come back to what you understand the best. I think where it helped for us is in 2007 to 10, we did this multi-generation life plan for all families that we represent. And one of the key findings was a lot of them wanted to do a lot more than just make a lot of money, which we were doing. They wanted to wake up with peace at night. So one of the first things we did was FACTA and GAFTA compliances, which, to be honest, many families did not appreciate that strongly before, including ours. I think the second thing they wanted to do was do things that allowed them to share time with the people that mattered, and to build things that were legacies, things that you'd remember and want to be remembered by. And when you go down the list of what are legacies, education, health, a certain degree of knowledge, clean energy, water, so sustainability, those were the things that popped out. And that's why we did health. Now, how did we end up in tech? We were already investing in tech. We had a lot of investments in the US, which was the primary market, and some of Singapore. Not so much deep tech, but just tech. I think when we started looking at healthcare, so we, for example, invested in the first home healthcare company in India. People didn't understand home healthcare. We started it ourselves, and then we got Bayada Home Health out of the US to be a co-partner investor. And then after a couple of years, we decided that, that's very different from hospitals. That's more logistics, distribution, people kind of play. We loved the idea of home health. What we couldn't quite grasp was how do we span as a family office that understood either arm's length investing or what we call fully in your campus controlled investing to something different, or operating a business. And so we decided as a family office that wasn't a space we wanted to be in, and we sold the shares to Bayada and a few other investors, and we made money. Here's the interesting thing. Nobody in India who's invested in home health made money after that, right? Because we were seeing commoditization of the space and aspects like that. I think we've dabbled. We've probably made more mistakes than we've learned. I think there are two key things. The first is when a family office decides to increase a geography or an asset class, it's actually very, very hard. The best way we learn is by investing with other family offices. So, for example, Ida and me share notes quite often on what to do, where we do it. Let's try and do something together. And that's how we've grown in certain geographies. Our first investment in Africa was a failure. Why did we do it? Because one of the families had a big holding in Africa and said, we can make it successful. No, they didn't make it successful. So I think for family offices, typically it's not as simple as a VC fund because it's not their money. Whereas for us, it is our money, right? And the reason we're doing it is so that there's a bigger pot of gold for the next generation to hopefully have a much more comfortable life, but also still have the hunger to do the right thing and with the value system that I think we want them to inherit. So I think that's our family office's thought process in this.
And that's very insightful because you also already explained how you invest, which we will drill down later as well. But I would still want to stay, going back to the GCC again, because in the GCC we have 1,500 family offices. That's the numbers I was given by FAB. But obviously there are many more family offices abroad, and many of them are coming into UAE and Saudi to add value as well, you know, to the country's transformation plans, Strategy 2030, which is, if you think about it, is like we are in the process in this region to build the motorways, you know, of AI or biotech, you know, if you want to use this analogy. And I wanted to go back, you know, to Dr. Stephen, because how are inbound family offices like yours, coming from America with a very strong biotech background, helping realize this vision? And what do you bring to the table, basically?
So, if you look historically, Hong Kong was where East meets West. Over the last 10 years, now it's really Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Singapore have kind of taken that mantle, particularly with family offices. So if you look at those jurisdictions, the amount of family offices has increased dramatically in those jurisdictions as Hong Kong has decreased in that. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in this evolving family office world, particularly in the GCC. Couple things. Number one, the range of investors, there's some gaps. You seem to have a fair amount of early stage investors. There's a lot of, I call them family offices, but sovereign funds, institutional type folks like Mubadala, you know, Adia, you know, all sorts of institutional, but there's some gaps in this whole journey of the capital journey, I'll call it. And so I think family offices, there's a lot of opportunities to step in, particularly in the GCC, and take advantage of those opportunities. I've always thought the level of innovation was very high here in the GCC region, and the valuations were very reasonable relative to the US. So if someone could figure out how to take the creme de la creme here and then take it, you know, help take them to the US, there was a natural arbitrage to take advantage of. So I think there are tremendous opportunities. I think, and I hear very often family offices wanting to come here and learn more and become part of the ecosystem. So it's a very exciting time from that. And I see tremendous opportunities. Just like with anything though, nothing's perfect. There's trial and error, and trying to figure out one of the challenges here in general, folks are a lot more guarded about their information about themselves and their family, so sometimes that makes it very difficult to figure out who and what and where you should spend your time with. But where there's challenges, there's a lot of opportunities as well, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you. Also, because you also brought another aspect for if there are any startups or founders in the public, it doesn't only go to getting, out, some checks, from somebody. It's like there is a great opportunity in these big infrastructure projects, these PPPs, and family offices are also part of that. So.
I think, to your point, Pilar, the public-private partnerships, there's so many projects going on here. That's where we see for our family office is partnering with the governments to provide catalytic capital in partnership with the government, because like in a place like Saudi, for example, there's so many ongoing projects and they're almost more projects than resources. So I do see a lot of opportunities there.
Thank you. So we have covered, all money new sectors. I mean, what is the asset allocation of family offices? So now we're going to talk about what might interest some people, the founders in this room. So when and how should you approach family offices? They got patient capital. They don't necessarily mind very much about liquid assets sometimes. So let's start by the deal sourcing. I mean, we heard already from our panelists, some ways as to how they source deals, but I would like to go back, to Dr. Samir, because as part of Atlas, you have analyzed thousands of, companies, and you have invested in quite a lot of deals. So to date, the data I got is that 27% of startup investments are FO back, but this is not health tech specific. This is a number I got somewhere. How common is for FOs to invest directly? And what is the trend in healthcare?
I think I'll split this question simply. I think the first thing is, historically, we used to get a lot of deal flow from funds we invested in as co-investors. The reality is the amount of co-investment or direct investments that's growing is increasing dramatically because we're quite disappointed and disillusioned by the GPs who are taking the cream on top of the cup of coffee. Let's not mince the words. A lot of them haven't performed well. I think identifying the top quartile performer in one cycle is typically not so simple in every cycle. So I think the amount of direct investment is increasing. Now, that being said, healthcare is a bit more problematic because you actually need deep skill. A bit like energy and a few semiconductor investing, for example, and certain deep tech, you do need deep skill. So if you're, we'd never done biotech, for example. So we invested our first 2 deals with biotech co-investors who understood the space really well. And the same for them when they were doing a healthcare investment. They wanted us to be on the cap table, and they said, Sam, you tell us what you want to do. And we actually then got a couple of our physicians, our CFO involved to kind of like evaluate and give regular advice. So I think the way we see family office investments, the way we've been investing, is we always look for fellow family offices who have a space understanding to be alongside the journey and on the cap table, aligned interests. That's the difference between GP-LP historical relationships. And I think when that works, we actually have a really good sweet spot. So we've just made 2 investments in media tech, which we didn't understand at all before. And we've done it with somebody from Walt Disney and one of the other big family offices from Viacom. And what we've learned is we didn't even know half the questions they were going to ask. We didn't even know the right question, right? In regular meetings. We didn't know what are the dangers for some of these deals. The same in, for example, gift funding, so in fintech. And we invested with the biggest financial investor that sold their company to the stock exchange. And he wrote a significantly bigger check than we did. And our money is safe. We don't have a problem with alignment. We don't have a problem with who's buying first and you're getting a bigger upside. We really don't have a problem with the 7-year fund life because, for example, some of these investments have stood or expect to stand much longer than 7 years or 10 years. So I think that's the advantage of doing it with family offices. But, I mean, that's how we do it.
No, and it's a very good one because basically what you're saying is you organize clubs, that's how it's called. And in the clubs, you bring the expertise that you are missing, yeah? So that's also another tip, for those of you who wonder. So, but you also brought the VC, and because we are asking why would family offices invest directly into alternative assets, but why FOs could be interesting for founders, the other side of the equation. And it's true that, going to Dr. Samir's words, is that this move fast VC model doesn't always work for biotech and health tech. So Ida, how can FOs add value beyond money? I mean, what is the smart value that VCs can bring, to this sector that needs a bit of a slow capital?
So beside the money they bring, it's actually the sector expertise. So for example, if you have a family office, where they are either active in a sector, so they are still active in medtech or biotech, or they might have exited the business, but the know-how is still in the family. There's something, the know-how obviously gets lost over generation if the family does not continue to invest in the sector. They deviate. But as Sam said, his family, or two of his families, when they exited it, they ventured out to other sectors, but actually they came back what they understand. So it's the value of family as first, it's often patient capital. So we don't have a life cycle of a fund. We don't need the valuation a fund often needs. So a fund often creates kind of a hypothetical valuation which has nothing to do with the actual exit value, if the exit ever happens. Because at the moment also, funds have a problem that with exiting. They kind of do funds which buy their own funds. There are a lot of models at the moment to save the fund model. So so for us, it's, for example, we don't like funds at our cap table if they don't add an expertise. Because I don't want to talk bad about the funds. There are some funds who are very specialized, who add a big of expertise, especially when it comes to healthcare. You need natural knowledge about regulations, reimbursement. It's much more complex. We bring more patients, and as also Sam said, it's a different thing if you invest your own capital than you invest other people's capital. So you are more risk adverse, but you tend to be also more diligent. It's a little bit when you go out and spend your own money. If you go out and buy a car with your own money, you spend some time. If you go buy out a car with other people's money for other people, you might be a little bit less diligent. You might be distracted. So, and it's the family office network. Exactly what Sam also said. If you venture out in another sector, for example, here at this conference, we might meet another family office, and we might enter with this family office a sector we didn't think about. So, and the other thing is with family offices, if you're in and they trust you. They might not invest in your company, but they might introduce you to somebody who might invest in your company. So that's also it's a networking exercise. So I always suggest people, try to build up a relationship with us. So don't pitch us necessarily. And I always call it the first meeting with us. It's like the first date, and the goal of the first date is to get a second date. It's not to marry. It's kind of that is. And some people come to us that you have the feeling they expect you after 10 minutes to write a check. Will not happen. I even don't know a case where this happened. So it's like the same. If you meet somebody, you don't go to the register office. You want to get to know each other. This applies the same for investing. It's the same concept.
You don't pitch, you court. I always say you develop the relationship. But of course, every family is unhappy in their own way, quoting, Tolstoy. So what's the catch? Of course, you bring patient capital. Obviously, it's going to be relationship driven. But what would you say that is the biggest downside of working with family offices? If you are used to VCs, yeah. Sorry, we're going off the script.
So, whereas the upside is always a downside. So family offices might be a little bit too hands-on on the cap table, maybe in the company. So we have sometimes to back off because, exactly as you said, you have more responsibility for the investment. And then if you have... But I don't see a lot of disadvantages with investing with family offices. We try to behave, and we know when we are told to back off for good reasons, then we can, but we tend to micromanage a little bit. I think that is the thing we do sometimes.
Stefan, I think you're burning to say something, and Chris too.
I'm just going to say the biggest challenge, biggest opportunity with family offices, it's flexible capital. The biggest downside with family offices, they don't have to do anything. So, and that's the challenge, getting family offices to do something. I just wanted to add, everything moves at the speed of trust. Everything moves at the speed of trust. If you approach things in a transactional way, I think your chances of success are not going to be great. If you approach things in a relationship way, try to build, a long-term relationship, I think your chance of success will be much higher.
Warning, don't go pitching after this session. No. Okay, but anyway, we are talking about relationships, and it's true because in a typical pitch VC thing, you show your track record, error, and then you say, my name is Pilar. It goes the other way around. It's about trust, and then eventually you will talk about business. So Isha, let's talk about flops. I mean, what we should not do when approaching family offices, because you are approached by, each of you is approached by many founders or funds looking for money. So what makes you click, and what should definitely founders should avoid doing when talking to you?
I think the way that I'd like to answer this question is it's not going to come across as extremely straightforward in the what not to do's, right? Because oftentimes when you're approaching family offices, it's not that simple. Don't do this, do this. In fact, we would suggest not to do that. Don't come in with a list of rules and a playbook to follow. But if we do think about the founder, investor, family office fit, we're talking about going beyond just, the traits and characteristics of a founder, right? The discussions oftentimes come down to values being aligned. A lot of that is being talked about, but I've personally struggled with understanding what value alignment actually looks like in practice. And I should say this, every time I think about this topic, a question pops up in my mind, and it's actually from a verse in the Quran. It's essentially a very vivid image of, the world coming to a standstill as we know it, right? The stars are falling off, the seas are flooding in, and then the sun is folding up. And towards the end of the verse, we're asked one question, and that is, where are you really going? Now, in rooms like these, more often than not, we want similar things. The end goal is either legacy, liquidity, scale, return, growth, right? So it's not so much as the destination, but rather about direction. And as founders, entrepreneurs, we more often than not find ourselves at crossroads where we have to make some really difficult choices. And we face this in 2007 when our exposure with the Lehman Brothers vanished in 14 days, right? And in that moment, we were at similar crossroads where we had to pick a path. You pick short-term gains with a lifelong path of compromises or a path of integrity. Tougher, but then when we went back and really asked ourselves that question, where are we headed? The answer became clear, and that was the tougher route, the path of integrity, not because it looks good on paper, but because we understand that's what truly compounds in the long term. So as families or founders, works both ways. When we're looking at aligning ourselves with the right people, it's not so much about where the next big win or the next big check is coming from. They're important elements, but I think we must ask ourselves a deeper question, and that is, when things fall apart, which they inevitably will, how are you going to show up, right? And we shouldn't just ask each other that question, but as families, we should ask ourselves that, how involved do you want to be with your investments, right? Because more often than not, as I said, it's not about the end goal. True fit lies in aligning yourself with people who will encourage you to pursue those values as you're headed towards that end goal. Because more often than not, that end goal is not going to be visible all times, or it's not going to be the same at all directions. So whether we like it or not, it comes down to that one question, which is, where are we really going?
And it's the value question. I always say, as a metaphor, is a tortoise versus a hare, like you're more on the tortoise but continuous. So you need to find partners, to join the journey, but finding what the journey is the difficult one. And in the current environment, doing what you should is not it's not the easy way, by all means. Yeah, because, this is for another panel, more philosophical. So we are reaching nearly the end of the panel, but I have a last question, and if we have some Q&A, extra time, that would be very nice. But some of you might be wondering, okay, FOs, we know what they are, why they invest, where they invest, but I am talking to VCs, so what should we do? Is because now, traditionally, it was the VCs that were investing in this sector, health tech, biotech. Now we see more FOs coming into this territory. So what is the interplay? And I'd like to ask this question to you, Chris, because you wear multiple hats, across the ecosystem. So how do you see these two entities cooperating? I mean, what are the formulas, really, that you see from an investment model perspective?
Well, I think, just bringing together a few different points from some of the other panelists, right? Like, completely understand Samir's goals for going direct, right? Isha's goals for kind of going with funds. I think everybody kind of takes their own approach depending on what's comfortable for different families. I think the commonality in my mind, especially in this vertical, is the idea of you probably need to have somebody that can help you diligence the vertical. If that somebody is another family that has excellence in that space and you're co-investing with them, that's fantastic. If it's a VC, GP that you like and trust, that's fantastic. So I think the concept is a matter of you need kind of that help. If it's internally, that's great as well, but I haven't seen that as common with the majority of those family offices that we talked about. I personally, like for my own personal investments, I prefer fund investments. I've done my direct investments before as well, but similar to Isha, I like the diversification aspects from a risk profile perspective. And then I like the idea that my GPs have real great domain expertise. So I think there is, for all intents and purposes, a partnership in there. The other thing that bluntly, super bluntly, right? The concept of, I think the previous gentleman who was speaking up here was talking about the whole VC concepts. He shared about 2 and 20 models and all this sort of stuff. And I think some of my panelists might disagree with this, but I'm actually very happy paying a 2 and 20. The concept of the 2 and 20 for me actually aligns our values and aligns our interests, because anybody who's running a fund, a good fund, let me qualify that, a good fund, right, they have so many options as a GP. They can make so much more money in so many different things as a GP than the salary they get from a 2%. The 2%, unless we're talking about 20 billion AUM, that's something different. But if we're talking about 250 million or less VC fund, that 2% is not what you get wake up for. So they're working that hard for that carry. And that carry, I think, does align our values in the sense of they're going to work hard to try to outperform, and thus they make a good amount of money. And I want my partners to make a lot of money, especially if they're making me money. So I think that's where VCs and family office can really align.
Thank you so much. With this, we're reaching the end of the panel, but I'm going to be a bit cheeky. Can we take one question from the public? Yeah, I heard yes.
I was taking a mic. 1 second. Yeah, go for it. Who has a
Yes?
question?
Okay.
Yes, we have a mic in the crowd.
I've got my boring conclusion, so somebody can ask a question.
Okay,
I hope you have a
we have a
question.
mic right here. Who's a question? Raise your hand. Bingo, right here. Perfect.
Yep.
There you go.
Thank you very much for the information, Pilar. It was very nice. I really like to understand. My name is Demet Sal. We are Genome to Life. We are focusing on regenerative precision medicine, fundraising. Target is women's health, because women is the regenerative model for longevity. Because pass on the information. Woman is the human, and man is the son of a human. Don't forget that. So I'd like to learn more about family offices and how you approach to family offices. Maybe it's been asked because this became a kind of a box. Who you know doesn't matter. However, it is different to present the data and information for family offices. How long it will take, how you present, and when you can close the deal, and what is your expectation? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So basically, your question is, how should you go, where do you find family offices and how you approach them? Like,
I can take a first shot. So I
Yes.
think, first of all, it's you go more gently with family offices because it's not, if you walk in saying it's, I need a decision within 3 hours, then probably not the right group to come and say hello to. I think family offices typically take a bit more time evaluating a deal, point one. I think it always helps to have a good, soft introduction to a family office. I think the feedback was go with trust. And I think the trust is relationships and time. And it's built by shared time, shared pain, and shared values. So if you find somebody that aligns these three, that's the way I'd come in. I think the other piece, which is the valuation and stuff like that, which very briefly, we've been in the room where funds we've invested in have paid higher premiums on deals than we were willing to offer. And that's the difference with other people's money, because we've walked out from the deal, the funds won it, and then we don't invest in the next round of the fund when they don't return. So towards the question on alignment, I don't see the alignment in 2 and 20 because the time frame of a family office is longer. So I think in some of your spaces like health, femtech, it is a longer cycle. Now, if it's a consumer-facing product, which is going to hit and run very fast, that might be very different. You could probably get away with talking to a VC and a fund at the same, a family office at the same time.
Actually, can I interrupt? Thank you very much for pointing out. That's the fallacy of the statement, because we have 3 kinds of product. It's multimodal. First thing is diagnostics. It's applicable to not only human but veterinary use. We have product with 9 different elements, and it can get it done in 8 months. So there are times, like you said, and how you evaluate and how you converse with a partner to get a funding, and also partnering. There are 2 different things, because with a partnering you can run faster and get it done better. Thank you.
and thank you for that. I think the takeaway of this is you don't pitch, you court. You need to understand the best way to approach, the best time to approach a family office is when you're not racing. You need to know the ecosystem. You need to understand who's who in the space. We're already seeing in these panelists, we're only 5 family offices here, but each of them have some differences, yeah? Because every family is different. So as a conclusion, I would say that somewhere out there, the family will be waiting for you, if this is the right fit. But something is for sure. You will hear more about family offices entering this space as we advance the years. So what I would say, do not only watch this space, but court the space as well. But with that, I would really love to thank these 5 beautiful panelists. I really enjoy listening to your stories, and I hope the public enjoy the value add as well. To get you